Good afternoon, everybody. Christopher Saul over here at Mid Bay News. I'm here with Cynthia West, who is running for the School Board District 5 seat in Okaloosa County. This is your second school board interview of the day from me. But Cynthia, you've had a busy day, so I think we should probably just start with that. There's been a national news story that's gotten our attention concerning you. Basically, you gave a deposition the other day. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yes, it was, it was a sworn statement that I provided in regard to some facts in regards to a relationship that I had, and then also something that happened with a prior work arrangement that I had.
And so after watching it last night, it seems that it revolves around Congressman Thomas Massie, a relationship that you guys had been in the past. And can you kind of tell me that this doesn't feel like it's directly in the school board vein, but it feels like it's ancillary to it? How does this affect your campaign?
Well, actually, a big part of why I did what I did is, you've been paying attention to what's been happening in our school district, right? And with the school board meetings and what we've been finding, that there are a lot of work dynamics that our teachers and support staff are having to deal with. A lot of almost seems as if there's like a two-tier disciplinary process, and a lot of things that are just not healthy that I've been becoming more and more aware of. And so in this, I've been asking people to come forward because I need people to start having conversations if we're going to try and change the culture. And there was this fear. There's this fear of retaliation, the power, and all these different things, losing their job, and it was hitting me in a very personal way because I had been living something very different but very similar at the same time. And so I'm like, how can I be basically asking these people to help me change this, to come forward, to have this courage when I'm sitting on this, when I'm talking about needing transparency, and I have literally coming to the end of this period of time where I either have to choose, because I was trying to do the settlement without an NDA. I really did not want an NDA, and that was not anything that was possible. Um, and it didn't sit right with me at all. And so, after you come to your agreement, it goes to the House for approval. And so I was going to have to sign this thing. And how can I sign this thing when at the same time, with the same breath, I'm asking people to come forward to help me fix what's happening in our district? So I have to set an example and, walk the walk before I can ask those things.
So just a little bit more background on this, and then I really want to move into all the school district stuff because I got a lot of questions I want to ask
Okay.
you. This school district, or not the school district, excuse me. You allege that there was a $5,000 attempted payment from Congressman Massey to yourself as kind of like, I guess, for lack of a better term, like hush money. And then you said that there's a $60,000 that's on the table. If you were to sign it, you'd have to sign an NDA. What basis can you provide? Do you have like documents or other things like that that you can show us that kind of
I
show up the
do.
trail?
And I actually just got the email. I feel like I should tell people I came back from the dentist. So this side of my face is numb. I did not know how to stroke people. No, I just got an email from my house legal team, right? Because they provide you with free representation. And in that, I'm going to talk to them tomorrow because there's a breach of settlement agreement, obviously, because I'm walking away from the $60,000. And so in that, I will talk to them about, because I do have documentation, like, okay, now that I breached the settlement agreement, I just, I had a lawyer review that interview, right, to make sure there wasn't any defamation, to make sure I'm not, doing anything that's going to get me hurt in the long run, because I want to do the right thing, but I don't want to do it at a significant cost. So if that's something that I can make available, I do have it, and that's something that will be happening in the future.
Okay, awesome. So moving on to school board business. First thing I want to ask you about is something that's coming down the pipe from the state legislature right now, or not the state legislature, the governor's office. The Florida Education Association, the statewide teacher union, has sued the government basically they say that the school voucher program that we have here in Florida is
Unconstitutional.
unconstitutional, and they want to see an end to it. Uh, as a school board candidate, what's your position on that? Should school vouchers be made available for private schools and be used in that way, or should it all
Let
be
me
state money?
let me be very, very clear on this. The money follows the student. So when you hear people say that they are taking money from the district, I don't agree with that, and that is not the view of our legislators and as well as the governor's office. And so in that, yes, we have some significant issues with the voucher system. So you had SB 318, which was Don Gates's bill. That was a really hefty bill. There was things that were really good in there because there was provisions where people were abusing the voucher system, right? And so if we're going to do it, we have to do it right. And the Florida Department of Education, they said that they're streamlining. It's one of those things we'll see, when it's said and done, if their fixes actually worked. But one of the main issues with SB 318, at least from the House side, was the fact that it would have put the funding for the vouchers on the chopping block. It would have had to have been appropriated like in the budget every year. And so let's say you got somebody who wasn't for educational choice, then they could have asked the funding for it. And so the House was never going to see it. So that's why you didn't have support in the House. And so, yes, there was issues with the voucher system, but I disagree with the union. And that may be why I didn't get a union endorsement. It may also be that I don't want to raise property taxes, but I want to be competitive, and I think that there's a way to do it appropriately. I think the fear of school choice and trying to hold on to the old model is what's going to ultimately harm public education. So I think you need board members who understand what our legislators are trying to do and how to incorporate traditional public education into that kind of a setting.
So the superintendent noted that it takes, I think, some order of tens of millions. I wanted to say 40 million, but I can't remember the exact number.
He said 40 and 45 million from the district.
So he said that the $45 million is essentially moving out of the district due to some various combination of school choice measures.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money. So what's the plan to replace that revenue as students move to other options?
Okay, so I can tell you some of the tools that our legislators have given us that we're not using, because there's a plan that is kind of, there's what's happening and there's what we could be doing.
Okay.
So let me shift our paradigm and let's start talking about the tools that our legislators are giving us. The Florida legislators have given us tools where charter schools, which can include schools of hope, they can co-locate in empty facilities. So I personally, if we have empty space in a school building, instead of having those charter schools take up space in a different building, I want to bring them into the schools so they can co-locate with us. The reason I want to do that is because then we get our capital outlay funds for those students. So we get funding to keep our buildings up. We're not closing schools. And if we offer programs that are enticing for those charter students to use, we can create a hybrid system, or maybe we can recoup more and more funds that we would have otherwise have lost, right? Now, are we going to have to, lose some schools possibly in the long run because we have homeschools and we have private schools? Yes, that's a possibility, but I would like to keep as much of the taxpayer investment as possible. And that means that we're going to have to fill those seats. And the other thing too, the other reason, and we can see this with Mary Esther, they talk about the attrition in South County. So are you still there?
I'm still here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have the attrition in South County, and part of that is, we have birth rates that are lower, but we have an aging population where we have people who are staying in their homes longer. I've been door knocking in Mary Esther. And so, the reality of it is if you have, an older population in a neighborhood in 10, 15 years, as those people start passing away or going to assisted living, whatever it may be, those then become the starter homes. And what have we done if we have demolished our public schools? Then the only option is a charter school or private school or something that's located outside of where we would have had our public school. And I don't want to see that, because I think that the public school buildings, not only is it a taxpayer investment, but it's a really important part of our communities.
Okay. And so I guess the last question I would want to ask on this particular piece is there are plenty of kids who probably their parents can't afford a private school, right? And so having everybody in the public school kind of does an economies of scale thing, and it makes the schools in this theory better than they would be without everybody in the schools. So by that measure, would you say that this hurts all students overall, the voucher program, or would you say that there's another way that it's actually helping students?
It helps students if we step up our game, if we provide quality education. And if we're not here to provide quality education, what are we doing in this space? I'm not afraid of competing. I'm not. And in fact, I was talking to, some different leaders in some of the private schools that we have in the community talking about collaboration. It doesn't have to, I mean, you talk about competition, but we can collaborate as well because, for instance, Liza Jackson, they're doing so well. And we look at what traditionally would be a more difficult area for education, right? This is
Yeah.
Liza Jackson is in one of our most economically disadvantaged areas in our school district, and yet they are flourishing. What are they doing so well? And I want to look at all these different models. I've been looking at St. Lucie County, looking at how they keep improving their grades, and yet at the same time they're dealing with funding constraints. What is working so that we can kind of reflect on those models? That's what I want to do.
So with Liza Jackson, right? I believe they have like a selection process, right? Like, can they reject people as a charter school?
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? You have different charter schools that have different requirements. And then also too, at that same point, and this is one of those things that I've been really wrestling with because I don't have all the answers for things, but behavior issues, right? If you're in a charter school or a private school, there's an expectation that your behavior is going to, be within a certain parameter, or you don't have the privilege to go there anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that, that accountability and that structure is something that we've kind of lost track of. Um, Boundaries and consequences are important, and we need parental participation as well. And so those are all factors. And so, I mean, I know that it's not fair to compare it like it's apples to apples, but I do want to see, what is it that they are doing that's working?
Moving on to another kind of set of questions. You've been in all three of the district races so far this year.
Yeah.
That's not something I've ever seen before.
Yeah.
So can you kind of explain to the voters? I mean, I've heard plenty of people say like this is somebody that just wants to get elected. How is this not that? How do you explain to people your decision to move from one race to the next race to the third race?
Well, I mean, when I started, right? And we'll just go through them, right? I started in District 3. So, I mean, I have to move. And I was like, okay, I'm most likely going to be moving to North County. Um, and then it became kind of apparent I was being asked, hey, a lot of people wanted me to shift down to District 1 because they wanted me to run against Lamar White. And I was like, you know what? I wouldn't mind moving to that area. I worked in that area. That is some of our more economically disadvantaged areas right there in that particular area of like Fort Walton. And so, but ultimately what happened was Lamar White, he had told me he was going to run and then he wasn't going to run. And so then you've got, because I do want to do what's right by the district. And so then you had Jerry who's running, and you had JD running, and I didn't want to split the vote with who I thought could do best by our district. I mean, that ultimately is where my heart is. And I go to church in Niceville. My son goes to school in Niceville. And then with all those records requests that I was talking to you about, with all the things that I'm finding, it is very important to me to preserve public education. And in that, I feel that we do need to, vote out the status quo. And I feel that each incumbent and in these school board races needed to be challenged. And so I made that shift
So
because I can't.
we've seen two schools, Mary Esther Elementary and Kenwood Elementary, be slated for closure here. I think, did they vote on that in April? That sounds right. Anyway, in the last couple months.
Yeah, they voted on it at the end of January.
Oh, wow. Wow, I'm losing my mind. Okay, so they voted on it. They voted for closure. The superintendent recommended this. Would you have supported that measure? Would you have voted in favor of closing those schools?
Well, and I spoke up on this, and I was really actually disheartened. I spent more time looking at Mary Esther, but I'm learning more stuff about Longwood. There were solutions that were given, but when you do those records requests, you find that they had made their mind up in regards to closing Mary Esther prior to the vote, right? You had people giving them solutions and options. You had what I was telling you about co-locating facilities. They could have done a VPK. I don't feel that they gave it a true chance to try and see if we could keep those schools open. And then also too, there's this frustration there because I feel like we become reactive as a district instead of proactive. So when you start looking at, the $8.5 million that was just spent on those two schools just, a couple of years before, just to turn around to offload those, that's frustrating to me, and that's irresponsible to our taxpayers. So yeah, I definitely would have done things very, very different.
So, if you would have done it differently, for lack of a better term, how do you justify keeping these schools open when, like you said, that we're having fewer and fewer students in the South End, and a lot of our younger population is moving north?
Okay, so like for instance, when I was talking about the aging population in Mary Esther, so if we do a statistical projection, which I haven't looked at their data, I think they had a company that came in, but I want to look at, okay, what does 15 years from now look like, right? Because it's irresponsible to just do something reactively because of what it's going to look like over the next 5 years. And so I want to look at that. And I also want to look at, are we losing children to these, to charter schools? And is there something that we can do? Is there a school of hope that we can bring in because it's within that opportunity zone? So if you look at their state legislator, and schools of hope have really good outcomes. We could have brought a school of hope in to take that vacant space to try and pull kids in that way. I mean, the other thing is too, you look at over by the mall, they're about to build a whole giant apartment complex there. So I feel like there were so many factors that weren't appropriately looked at.
Okay. Starting pay, let's just talk about it for Okaloosa County school teachers, is about $49,000 a year last time I checked. I could be wrong. They may have bumped it up some number, but while it gets closer to other districts as the teachers get more experience, there's still a significant gap, for example, with Walton County. And it's also more expensive to live in Okaloosa County than it is to live in like Mossy Head or Defuniak Springs. So it's kind of a double whammy for teachers. How do we stay competitive with Walton County or private schools or Santa Rosa County to keep good teachers?
So I've been really delving into our contracting. You've got and we've got two pools of money, right? So you've got your general fund, and that's where your teacher and your support staff, all that pay comes from. And then you have your capital outlay fund. So we're going to focus on the general fund. And so as I've been pouring into that, I'm like, okay, where can we find spaces where we can free up funds that we can get them to the teachers, the support staff, and then back into the classroom, because it's very important. And in that, I've been looking at our contracting, and I don't like the way we're doing contracting. So
When you say
I know that
contracting, do you mean the contract with the union or contracting like?
Oh, no. So like our IT contracting, for
Got it.
example,
Okay.
there's a lot of waste in that, where like you're renting equipment for the same price, like for a Chromebook, as you would for an iPad. So you're renting it for the price it would cost to buy a new iPad for the year.
Okay.
So, and just tons and tons of things that I'm finding. And then the other part of it is not having competitive bidding. Not opening it up for bidding. You see that over in the capital outlay funds with your total project manager. You've got Jacobs and Titan. They don't even have to rebid it. And I'm like, and things that are worth looking at, right? So you've got your SRO contract that has doubled in price in over 6 years. And at the same time, you're talking to county officials and they're saying that they're not wanting to pay as much. So I know that's going to keep increasing. And so you've got this awkward situation where you're like, okay, I don't want to pit my sheriff's department against my teachers. Who wants to do that? But at the same time, you understand that competition in the market can lower prices. So if the legislators, and this is looking at the legislative tools that we have, if they've opened this up for the private sector to come in and bid, even if you end up ultimately going with the sheriff's department, maybe that can help lower prices, or at least we can have a conversation about where the best use of our funds are. And so those are the things that I kind of just want to pour into.
Would you commit to voting yes on any project that would bring affordable housing specifically for teachers? So kind of like a jobs-based issue?
Yeah, actually, I was looking at I nerd out at night sometimes. So I was looking at different ways that we can free up different funds and like our TDC funds, for instance. You have to use those for specific things. But what's one of our biggest economic drivers in Okaloosa County? It's tourism, right?
Mhm.
And so I was thinking about this whole idea of if we have vocational programs to vector kids into like welding and stuff. Well, what if we did something that was vectoring them more into something like culinary or hospitality or those sorts of things? And I was looking at like, okay, what can you use these funds on? And then I was looking at another thing that people have been talking about is land conservation. And I was like, okay, and what about affordable housing? And that's something that is extremely important, I feel, because what is it, gentrification? I'm trying to remember the word. It's a cool word that my son taught me, where um, essentially it's becoming unaffordable in Okaloosa County. So you have people who are, shifting more and more North County towards Alabama. And I don't like that. I mean, I'm a social worker, right? We want to make sure that we're able to have the people who work in our community live in our community. Now, if that's something where there's a certain like section of houses or there's a voucher system, I'm not sure what that would look like. And there's, different organizations to work with to kind of try and figure what that is. But that is something that I would definitely be open to looking at.
The last vote that I've been able to find where the school board's members had a split vote, so it wasn't a 5-0 decision, was August of 2020. I can't find anything more recent than that. So that's 5 years where the whole board has agreed on every single vote. That's roughly 7,500 votes, over 150 meetings. Um, I'm curious if any of those 7,500 votes you would have dissented with the rest of the board that's up there right now.
Well, yeah, I mean, we already just kind of had a conversation about Mary Esther, for instance, but this goes back to the earlier question too, where you had asked me about shifting. One of the things that I recognize is in order to get anything done, um, it, ultimately, when you're on the board, you don't work for the superintendent, you work with him, right? So it's like
Mm-hmm.
checks and balances, and that is a very important thing. You do not want an echo chamber, right? And so, in order to even have a conversation, if it was just me, right, I would need somebody. If I wanted to make a motion, I would need someone to second it before we could even talk about it. And if we wanted to vote on something, we need 3 votes to make a change. And so ultimately it's very important that we have these seats filled with people who are even willing to talk about the issues, because we can't just keep voting in an echo chamber. Groupthink is not healthy. It's not healthy governance.
Cynthia, those are all my questions. I've asked a lot of them. Do you have anything else you want people to know about your campaign, uh, website, stuff like that, just so they can look into you a little bit more?
Yeah, Cynthia for Florida. That's my website. So you can go Cynthia for Florida.com. I'm sorry. And then Cynthia West for School Board on Facebook. And yeah, reach out to me if you have any questions. I really appreciate the dialogue and ideas. I'm not here to say that I have all the answers. I'm a legislative nerd. I really see the vision that our legislators have for our schools, our public education system moving forward with the school choice. So, you've got people who say, oh, my kid's in private school, my kid homeschools, I don't have to worry about the school board races. Well, that's not true, right? You can see that with what's going on with the teachers union right now. When you're on the school board, you have governance over that chartering process too. So those are things that are really important to have somebody who's supportive of education choice. And then the other portion of it is also, even if you don't have kids in the system, you're paying a lot of taxes. So you want somebody who's a fiscal conservative, who's going to make sure that their fiduciary duty is being fulfilled. And so I appreciate everyone's vote, and thank you for the time.
Of course. Thanks, Cynthia.
Thanks.